discussion, so different speakers from different audience, so I think it is better. So the next speaker is from the Commission, the Deputy General Director, Antti Peltomäki.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start with echoing what Vice President Cruz has just said about the importance of the summit in helping us in the Commission to prepare the radio spectrum policy programme. And I would also underline her message that the programme must be a strategic document with its primary purpose to provide direction and goals for the spectrum policy in Europe. And to assist that, in this workshop session, we must focus on the economic, social and cultural priorities that spectrum policy must support, and to begin discuss how it can effectively do so. I recognise that many participants in here are keenly interested in the digital dividend, but we must use also the opportunity to widen the horizon and consider other matters as well. And we will address the digital dividend issues in the next workshop by our head of unit, Piers O'Donoghue. What we can say here is that both broadcasting and wireless broadband access have a high potential and social value. Wireless solutions will be essential in many regions of Europe to address the digital divide and ensure access for all in high-speed internet. But there are other services and applications as well. When considering horizontal policy objectives that spectrum can contribute to, we must recall that many and varied public uses for spectrum, such as radio and television broadcasting, police and ambulances, health systems, social alarms, air traffic control and of course defence. Some of these are member state responsibilities, but as long as there is only limited spectrum to share, the overarching strategy must be able to support these uses as well as the ones we regulate together. Indeed, even in the areas where the member states will always be sovereign, such as policing and security, a coordinated approach to spectrum planning can mean that the same equipment can be used across Europe. And this internal market in equipment can mean significant budget savings and economies of scale, which facilitates the provision of these essential public services at the national level. The high level of participation in this summit is a good indication of the fact that many different applications rely on the spectrum and that it is a scarce resource that we are all competing. The pace of technological development is breathtaking and the demands for services to sustain and improve our quality of life are high, but the laws of physics do not change. And it is therefore our challenge to make most efficient use of spectrum and to ensure that such use reflects our political priorities. It is also for this reason that we want to hear your views on the scope of the programme. The impetus comes from the framework on electronic communication. But as we need a coherent policy to use spectrum across the internal market and in the sectors that benefit citizens beyond the provision of the communications, we would like to hear any views as to why the programme should not cover all internal market sectors and activities where the spectrum is used. Moving back to the broadband, last week the US FCC presented the broadband strategy that Congress had requested. There is no need for an impossibility to go in any kind of a comparison to our own plans, but it is clear that the US is recognising the same strategic challenges that we are talking about here today. One of the key objectives of the digital agenda that we are preparing is fast and affordable broadband for all. The Commission has already been active in this area of spectrum. And I think that we must ensure its efficient use and timely authorisation at the national level. We look forward to input how this can be done. Choices will have to be made, and sometimes the choices are extremely tough. Therefore, it is important to assess where action is needed as a priority over the next 5 years, the duration of the first radio spectrum policy programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we have 2 slots now for member states representative and with not specific names. So the floor two requirements. One is from Finland. Yes, please. And then the second one, you will see. I mean, if you want to, please.
Madam Chair, from the Finnish perspective, I would like to underline 3 issues which are very close to the opening remarks by Mrs. Kroes and the Swedish representative, Mrs. Hägglöf. First, adequate access to spectrum. The demand for spectrum in electronic communication services will increase. This will result from the increasing volume of wireless communications, the Internet of Things in particular. In order to respond to the increasing demand, various alternatives should be considered with an open mind. One option is related to the digital dividend, and I hope I can come back to it later on. Second, flexibility. The high-speed connections are no longer a luxury, but a necessity. People can only be members of the information society if their connection is sufficient in order for them to use basic e-services. Availability of wireless networks can be, in a sparsely populated country like ours, best promoted by ensuring that the lower spectrum band can be used in a flexible way for the delivery of wireless services. We have seen the positive impact of the decision to allow the use of the GSM 900 band for UMTS services. In Finland, for example, we have 3 competing 3G networks. The operators claim that each of them will have a 100% population coverage by the end of 2012. Third, preparing for the future. The next great shake-up in the use of spectrum will probably occur with the coming of cognitive radio. It's likely that cognitive radio will also bring changes to spectrum management. In Finland, testing of cognitive radio has been allowed in the TV UHF band from the beginning of this year. The EU countries must be among the pioneers taking this leap into the unknown. This will require policy decisions which open up opportunities and enable growth. To sum up, we need to be ambitious, concrete and future-proofed in order to achieve welfare for citizens and competitiveness for the European industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A second member state, please. UK. Okay, sorry. UK.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think a key thing here from the UK's perspective is to try to remember what we're trying to achieve, and I think that's to set a framework for the next 5 years. And I think in order to achieve that, I would highlight 2 things in particular. One is, I think we're going to need to be ambitious. Spectrum is a vital resource used for all sorts of services and technologies which are absolutely essential to meeting the needs of European consumers. And I think if we're not ambitious, we'll be doing European consumers a disservice. Secondly, I think we need to be strategic. It's already been said by a number of speakers thus far, but I think it is critical that we pitch this at the strategic level. So what does that mean? It means developing a framework which incentivises efficient use of the scarce spectrum resource. So that's setting the framework at that strategic level, and I would say not being overly prescriptive in that framework in terms of how spectrum should be used. Indeed, we cannot predict what technologies and services are likely to be demanded by European consumers over the next 6 months, let alone over the next 5 years. So we need to develop that framework that allows those new technologies, those new services to develop over that sort of period of time. So I think here I'm talking about a framework which allows spectrum to change the way it's used so that it can develop over time. It can be used in relation to providing new services which